The gravel driveway crunched beneath my tires as I pulled up to the house that had haunted my dreams for 3 years. The Walker estate loomed before me, its ivy-covered brick facade as imposing as ever, though something felt different. The late November air carried the scent of wood smoke and dying leaves, and the familiar chill that seemed to seep through the walls even in summer. I sat in my car for a moment, hands still gripping the steering wheel, watching the warm glow spill from the windows. 3 years. 3 Thanksgivings spent in distant cities, making excuses about work and travel. But this year, something had pulled me back. Maybe loneliness, maybe duty, or perhaps the gnawing sense that I was running from something I'd never truly faced. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The front door opened before I could knock, and there stood my father, Gregory Walker, his silver hair perfectly combed, his posture as rigid as the day I'd left. His smile was polite but measured, the kind he reserved for business associates. "Jordan," he said, extending his hand rather than offering an embrace. "Good to have you home." Behind him, Elliot emerged from the living room, his presence filling the doorway like it always had. My older brother wore success like a tailored suit. Confident, comfortable, undeniable. His grin was genuine, at least, as he pushed past our father to wrap me in a hug that felt more like a performance than affection. "Look who finally decided to grace us with his presence," Elliot said, his voice carrying that familiar note of playful condescension. "The prodigal son returns." I forced a laugh, the sound hollow in my own ears. "Good to see you too, Elliot." As we moved inside, I noticed the changes immediately. The warm, lived-in furniture that had filled these halls during my childhood. Mom's antique writing desk, the worn leather armchair where she'd read to me, had been replaced with sleek, modern pieces that spoke of money but not memory. Everything was pristine, sterile, efficient. Elliot's influence, no doubt. The house felt colder than I remembered, and not just from the November air seeping through the old windows. The warmth that had once filled these rooms had died with my mother 5 years ago, leaving behind only the echo of what home used to feel like. "Lena's in the kitchen," my father said, already turning away. "She's been looking forward to seeing you." I found her there, surrounded by the familiar chaos of Thanksgiving preparation. Lena looked up from the turkey she was basting, her face breaking into the first genuine smile I'd seen since arriving. She wiped her hands on her apron and pulled me into a hug that reminded me why I'd always liked my brother's wife. "Jordan," she said softly, "I'm so glad you came home." Home. The word sat strangely in my chest, carrying weight I wasn't sure I wanted to bear. The dining room felt cavernous despite the 4 of us gathered around the polished mahogany table. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier, and the china, Mom's china, gleamed white against the dark wood. Everything was perfect, orchestrated hollow. We'd made it through most of dinner with the usual small talk. Elliot dominated the conversation with stories from his latest business ventures, his voice animated as he described closing deals and expanding markets. Father nodded approvingly, asking follow-up questions that showed he'd been paying attention to every detail of Elliot's life. When they asked about my work at the nonprofit, I kept my answers brief. 3 years of helping veterans find housing wasn't the kind of success story that impressed Gregory Walker. I caught Lena's sympathetic glances across the table, her silent understanding a small comfort in the familiar ritual of being overlooked. Then Father stood up, his wine glass in hand, and the room fell silent. "Before we finish this lovely meal," he began, his voice carrying the authority that had built his real estate empire, "I have an announcement to make." My stomach tightened. Gregory Walker didn't make announcements lightly. As you all know, this house has been in our family for 3 generations. It's seen births, deaths, celebrations, and sorrows. It's been our anchor. He paused, looking directly at Elliot. And it's time to ensure its future. The words that followed hit me like a physical blow. "I'm signing the deed over to Elliot," Father continued, his smile warm with pride. "All $2 million of it. He's earned it, building the business, carrying on the Walker name with distinction." Elliot's face lit up with surprised delight. "Dad, thank you. This is incredible." The room erupted in congratulations. Lena clapped politely, though I noticed her eyes flick toward me with concern. I sat frozen, my fork halfway to my mouth, watching my childhood home, the last tangible connection to my mother, slip away with the casual ease of a business transaction. A memory surfaced unbidden. I was 12, bursting through the front door with my blue ribbon from the county science fair, desperate to show Father my victory. But he was in the living room, teaching 16-year-old Elliot how to tie a proper Windsor knot for some business dinner. "Not now, Jordan," he'd said without looking up. "This is important." "Jordan," Elliot's voice pulled me back to the present, "I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done. You've been the rock of this family, especially after Mom." He raised his glass. "To Jordan, for always being there when we needed you." I lifted my own glass with numb fingers and forced my lips into what I hoped resembled a smile. "Congratulations, Elliot. You deserve it." The lie tasted bitter against my tongue, but it was easier than the truth. Easier than admitting that watching my father give away our mother's house felt like losing her all over again. Easier than confronting the fact that I'd spent 32 years waiting for acknowledgement that would never come. As the evening wound down, I made my excuses about an early drive back to the city. But as I gathered my coat, Margot Reyes appeared at my elbow. "Jordan," she said quietly, "could you stay behind for a moment? There's something we need to discuss." Margot's office felt like a sanctuary compared to the suffocating atmosphere of the dining room. The family lawyer had known us since I was a child, her silver hair and kind eyes a constant, through decades of Walker family business. She closed the door behind us with deliberate care, and I noticed her hands trembling slightly as she moved to her desk. "Sit down, Jordan," she said, her voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. "What I'm about to tell you is going to come as a shock." I sank into the leather chair across from her desk, my mind still reeling from dinner. "If this is about the house, Margot, I appreciate whatever you're trying to do, but—" "Your father never signed that deed," she interrupted, pulling a manila folder from her desk drawer. "What happened tonight was theater, Jordan, nothing more." The words didn't make sense. I stared at her, waiting for clarification that would restore order to a world that had just tilted off its axis. 13 months ago, your father came to me with a request," Margot continued, opening the folder to reveal legal documents bearing the Walker family letterhead. "He wanted to amend his will. Specifically, he wanted to ensure that the family estate would go to you, not Elliot." My breath caught. "That's impossible." "You saw him tonight." "I saw a man who couldn't find the courage to tell his family the truth while he was alive," she said, sliding a notarized document across the desk. "But legal documents don't lie, Jordan. According to your father's last will and testament, registered with the state of Massachusetts, you are the sole heir to the Walker estate." I picked up the papers with shaking hands. There it was, in black and white, my name, my father's signature, Margot's witness signature, all properly notarized and filed. The date was from last October, nearly a year ago. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would he do this but never tell me?" Margot's expression softened with something that looked like pity. "Your father was a complicated man, Jordan. He expressed regret about how he'd treated you over the years. He said you were the one who'd actually taken care of this family, especially your mother in her final days. He admired your integrity, even if he never understood your choices." She reached into the folder again and pulled out a sealed envelope with my name written in Father's careful handwriting. "He asked me to give you this when the time came. I think tonight qualifies." I took the envelope, feeling its weight like a stone in my palm. "Does Elliot know?" "No one knows except me, you, and your father. He made me swear to keep it secret until after his death." She paused, studying my face. "Jordan, this house is legally yours. It always has been. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I stared at the envelope, at the documents, at the woman who'd just turned my entire understanding of my life upside down. Somewhere in the house above us, Elliot was probably already planning renovations, drunk on the validation he'd craved his entire life. I don't know, I admitted. I honestly don't know. Margot's office felt like a sanctuary compared to the suffocating atmosphere of the dining room. The family lawyer had known us since I was a child, her silver hair and kind eyes a constant through decades of Walker family business. She closed the door behind us with deliberate care, and I noticed her hands trembling slightly as she moved to her desk. "Sit down, Jordan," she said, her voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. "What I'm about to tell you is going to come as a shock." I sank into the leather chair across from her desk, my mind still reeling from dinner. "If this is about the house, Margot, I appreciate whatever you're trying to do, but—" "Your father never signed that deed," she interrupted, pulling a manila folder from her desk drawer. "What happened tonight was theater, Jordan, nothing more." The words didn't make sense. I stared at her, waiting for clarification that would restore order to a world that had just tilted off its axis. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 13 months ago, your father came to me with a request, Margot continued, opening the folder to reveal legal documents bearing the Walker family letterhead. He wanted to amend his will. Specifically, he wanted to ensure that the family estate would go to you, not Elliot. My breath caught. "That's impossible. You saw him tonight." "I saw a man who couldn't find the courage to tell his family the truth while he was alive," she said, sliding a notarized document across the desk. "But legal documents don't lie, Jordan. According to your father's last will and testament, registered with the state of Massachusetts, you are the sole heir to the Walker estate." I picked up the papers with shaking hands. There it was, in black and white, my name, my father's signature, Margot's witness signature, all properly notarized and filed. The date was from last October, nearly a year ago. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would he do this but never tell me?" Margot's expression softened with something that looked like pity. "Your father was a complicated man, Jordan. He expressed regret about how he'd treated you over the years. He said you were the one who'd actually taken care of this family, especially your mother in her final days. He admired your integrity, even if he never understood your choices." She reached into the folder again and pulled out a sealed envelope with my name written in Father's careful handwriting. "He asked me to give you this when the time came. I think tonight qualifies." I took the envelope, feeling its weight like a stone in my palm. "Does Elliot know?" Quote, "No one knows except me, you, and your father. He made me swear to keep it secret until after his death." She paused, studying my face. "Jordan, this house is legally yours. It always has been. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I stared at the envelope, at the documents, at the woman who'd just turned my entire understanding of my life upside down. Somewhere in the house above us, Elliot was probably already planning renovations, drunk on the validation he'd craved his entire life. "I don't know," I admitted. "I honestly don't know." My childhood bedroom felt smaller than I remembered, its blue walls faded and the Red Sox pennants curling at the edges. I sat on the twin bed where I'd spent countless nights reading by flashlight, the sealed envelope heavy in my hands. The house had settled into silence, but I could hear Elliot's voice drifting up from the living room below, already discussing plans with Lena. I turned the envelope over, tracing my name in Father's precise handwriting. Gregory Walker had never been a man of many words, at least not with me. Our conversations had been functional, brief, grades, chores, expectations. I couldn't remember the last time he'd told me he was proud of me. My hands shook as I tore open the envelope. The letter inside was brief, written on his personal stationery in the same careful script. "Jordan, I'm not good with words, never have been. Your mother always said I loved in quiet ways, but I wonder if that was just an excuse for cowardice. You deserved better from me. I know you think I don't see you, but I do. I see how you held your mother's hand through those final weeks when I couldn't bear to watch her fade. I see how you chose helping people over making money, even when I called it foolish. I see how you've never once asked me for anything, Not even the acknowledgement I should have given freely. The house should be yours. It was always supposed to be yours. You understand what home means in a way Elliot never will. You have your mother's heart. I wish I had the courage to tell you this face to face. I wish I had the courage to tell you a lot of things. The letter ended there, unsigned, as if Father had stopped mid-thought and never returned to finish what he'd started. I read it twice, then 3 times, searching for meaning in the spaces between words. A memory surfaced. I was 8, devastated because I'd struck out in the final inning of my Little League game. Mom had wrapped me in a hug, but Father had stood apart, uncomfortable with my tears. Later that night, I'd found a new baseball glove on my dresser with a note. For next time, Dad. No explanation, no grand gesture, just a quiet acknowledgement that he'd noticed my disappointment. Your father loves in quiet ways. Mom's words echoed in my mind as I stared at the letter. All these years, I'd been waiting for him to love me the way he loved Elliot, openly, proudly, without reservation. But maybe this was how Gregory Walker loved. In amendments to wills, in unsigned letters, in gifts left without ceremony. I looked at the family photo on my nightstand, taken when I was 12 and Elliot was 16. Mom's arm was around my shoulders, her smile radiant. Father stood behind us, his hands resting on Elliot's shoulders, his expression serious but somehow content. The photo had faded over the years, but I could still see the love in Mom's eyes, the way she'd looked at all of us like we were her entire world. For the first time in years, I let myself cry, not just for the house, not just for the revelation, but for the father I'd never really known, and the son I'd spent my life trying to be. The morning air was crisp as Elliot and I walked the familiar path that wound around the estate's perimeter. The oak trees were bare now, their skeletal branches reaching toward a gray November sky. I'd asked him to walk with me after breakfast, and he'd agreed with the easy confidence of someone who owned the world, or at least thought he did. You know, Jordan, he said, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air, I've been thinking about what you could do with your life now that you're back. The business is expanding, and I could use someone I trust to handle the community outreach programs. Give you a chance to do that do-gooder stuff you love, but with real resources behind it. I stopped walking. The irony was almost laughable. Elliot offering me charity while standing on land that was legally mine. That's generous of you, Elliot. But there's something we need to talk about. I pulled the will amendment from my jacket pocket, the papers folded and refolded from the sleepless night I'd spent reading Father's letter. The house isn't yours. Elliot's laugh was sharp and dismissive. What are you talking about? You were there last night. Dad? Dad amended his will 13 months ago. The house is mine. Legally, officially, mine. I held out the documents. Margot showed me after dinner. He took the papers, his face shifting from amusement to confusion to something harder. This is a joke, right? Some kind of sick joke? Read the signature, Elliot. Look at the date. It's real. His hands shook as he scanned the documents, and I watched his face cycle through disbelief, anger, and finally, something that looked like panic. You forged this. You and that old woman, you cooked this up because you can't stand seeing me succeed. Why would I forge something like this? Because you've always been jealous. The words exploded from him, his careful composure cracking. You've spent your whole life in my shadow, and now you think you can steal what's mine? What's yours? I felt something shift inside me, a lifetime of swallowed words finally finding their voice. What exactly have you done to earn this house, Elliot? Besides being born first? I built Dad's business into an empire. I carried the Walker name. You kissed his ass, I said quietly. You became exactly what he wanted you to be. But I'm the one who held Mom's hand while she died. I'm the one who stayed with her through the chemo, the sleepless nights, the fear. Where were you, closing deals in Boston? His face went pale. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about fair? You got Dad's approval, his pride, his respect. You got everything I ever wanted, and it still wasn't enough. You needed the house, too. I was never cut out to carry the family name, he said, his voice shaking with rage. "Is that what you think, that I had it easy?" "Because you cared about people more than profit," I shot back. "Yeah, Elliot, that's exactly what I think. And you know what? Maybe that's not such a bad thing." From the porch, I caught sight of Lena watching us, her face pale with concern. She'd heard enough to understand that everything had changed. Elliot crumpled the papers and threw them at my feet. "You want to destroy this family over a house? Fine, but don't expect me to make it easy for you." He stormed off toward the house, leaving me standing alone among the bare trees, the legal documents scattered in the dead leaves at my feet. The call came at 3 in the morning, 2 weeks after our confrontation. Lena's voice was strained, barely controlled. "Jordan, you need to come to the hospital. Your father, he's had another episode." Quote, Massachusetts General looked exactly like every other hospital at night. Too bright, too quiet, filled with the kind of silence that makes you afraid to breathe too loudly. I found Lena in the waiting room, her face pale and drawn. Elliot was nowhere to be seen. "Where is he?" I asked. "He went home an hour ago. Said he couldn't watch Dad deteriorate." She looked up at me with tired eyes. "He blames you for this, you know. Says the stress of the legal battle triggered it." Gregory lay in the ICU bed like a shadow of himself, machines monitoring every breath, every heartbeat. His silver hair was disheveled, his usually perfect posture reduced to the frailty of age and illness, but his eyes were alert when I entered the room. "Jordan." His voice was barely a whisper. I pulled a chair close to his bed, unsure of what to say. We'd spoken only once since Thanksgiving, a brief, awkward phone call where he'd asked about my health and I'd asked about his. Neither of us had mentioned the house. "I brought something," I said finally, pulling his letter from my jacket pocket. The paper was worn now from reading and rereading. "You never signed it." His eyes focused on the letter, and something that might have been a smile flickered across his face. "Did you mean it?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "What you wrote about me having Mom's heart, about the house being mine." He nodded slowly, his hand reaching toward mine with effort. "Should have told you years ago." The door burst open, and Elliot stormed in, his face flushed with anger. "What the hell are you doing here? Haven't you done enough damage?" "Elliot," I started. "No, you want to destroy this family over money? Fine, but don't you dare pretend you care about him now." Father's monitor began beeping faster, his breathing becoming labored. I stood up, facing my brother across our father's bed. "This isn't about money. It never was." "Then what? Revenge? Some twisted need to prove you matter?" "It's about understanding who I am," I said quietly, "who I've always been, and who he really was." Father struggled to sit up, his voice cutting through our argument with surprising strength. "Enough!" We both turned to him, startled. His breathing was shallow, but his words were clear. "The house is Jordan's, always was meant to be." Elliot's face went white. "Dad, you don't know what you're saying. The medication." "I know exactly what I'm saying." Father's eyes found mine. "Your mother would be proud." The machines started alarming, and nurses rushed in. As they worked around him, Father's eyes never left mine. I saw something in them I'd been searching for my entire life. Recognition, acceptance, maybe even pride. He died that night, quietly, with Lena and me holding his hands. Elliot had left the room and never came back. St. Mary's Cathedral was filled to capacity, a sea of dark suits and respectful whispers. Gregory Walker had been a pillar of the business community, and his funeral drew the kind of crowd that made local newspapers. I sat in the front pew, Lena beside me, an empty space where Elliot should have been. He'd arrived late, slipping into the back of the church as the service began. I'd felt his presence without turning around, that familiar weight of his disapproval settling on my shoulders like a shroud. When Father McKenna called me to the podium, my legs felt unsteady. I'd written and rewritten the eulogy a dozen times, each draft feeling inadequate to capture the complexity of the man we were burying. The congregation fell silent as I unfolded my notes, but when I looked out at the faces staring back at me, I set the paper aside. My father was not an easy man to understand, I began, my voice carrying further than I'd expected in the vast space. He spoke in actions rather than words, in gestures so subtle you could miss them if you weren't paying attention. For most of my life, I thought that meant he didn't see me at all. I found Lena's face in the crowd, her encouraging nod giving me strength to continue. But Gregory Walker taught me something profound in his final days, that love doesn't always look the way we expect it to. Sometimes it comes in unsigned letters, in quiet amendments to legal documents, in late-night conversations with lawyers about sons who deserve better than they received. A murmur rippled through the congregation. I could feel Elliot's presence like a storm cloud in the back of the church. He wasn't perfect. He made mistakes, chose business over family too often, struggled to express emotions that didn't fit neatly into boardroom presentations. But in the end, he understood something crucial, that legacy isn't about what you accumulate, it's about what you choose to pass on. I paused, thinking of Father's letter, of his final words in the hospital. My father believed in quiet dignity, in responsibility, in the importance of doing right even when no one is watching. He taught me that worth isn't measured in applause or approval, but in the lives you touch when no one is keeping score. As I returned to my seat, Lena squeezed my hand. "That was beautiful," she whispered. After the service, as mourners filed past offering condolences, I noticed Elliot had vanished without a word. Lena found me in the parking lot, her coat pulled tight against the December wind. "He left during your eulogy," she said quietly. "Jordan, I'm sorry about everything. You don't need to apologize for him." She was quiet for a moment, then reached into her purse and pulled out a small, leather-bound book. "I found this in your mother's things years ago. I thought you should have it." It was a collection of Emily Dickinson poems, the pages worn soft with reading. Tucked inside the front cover was an envelope with my name on it, the handwriting unmistakably my mother's. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, in her careful script, "For Jordan, who understands that home is not a place but a feeling. Build something beautiful. Love, Mom." I looked up to find Lena watching me with tears in her eyes. "She knew," she said simply. Somehow, she always knew. The probate courtroom in downtown Boston was smaller than I'd expected, its wood-paneled walls and fluorescent lighting giving it the atmosphere of a municipal office rather than the stage for a family's destruction. I sat beside Margot at the plaintiff's table, my hands folded to keep them from shaking, while Elliot and his team of 3 attorneys occupied the defense side like an occupying army. Judge Patricia Hoffman was a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd spent decades sorting through family disputes. She reviewed the case files with methodical precision before looking up at the courtroom. "This is a straightforward probate matter," she began. "The petitioner claims the deceased amended his will to leave the family estate to the younger son. The respondent contests the validity of that amendment. Mr. Walker?" She looked at me. "You may begin." Margot had prepared me for this moment, but walking to the witness stand still felt like stepping off a cliff, under oath. I recounted the years of caring for my mother, my father's distance, the shock of Thanksgiving dinner, and Margot's revelation about the will. "Tell the court about your relationship with your father in his final years," Margot prompted. "It was complicated," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "My father wasn't an emotionally expressive man, but in the hospital, before he died, he confirmed that the house was meant to be mine. He said my mother would be proud." Elliot's lead attorney, a sharp-suited man named Morrison, stood for cross-examination. "Mr. Walker, isn't it true that you've harbored resentment toward your family for years? That you felt entitled to more than you received?" "I felt overlooked," I admitted. "But this isn't about entitlement. It's about understanding what my father actually wanted. And conveniently, this, quote, understanding comes with a $2 million inheritance." Before I could respond, the courtroom doors opened and Lena walked in. She'd been subpoenaed by both sides, but I hadn't been sure she would actually testify. She took the stand with quiet dignity. "Mrs. Walker," Margot began, "you were present during Gregory Walker's final conscious moments. What did you witness?" Lena's voice was clear and unwavering. "My father-in-law explicitly stated that the house belonged to Jordan. He was lucid, specific, and adamant about it. He said it was always meant to be Jordan's." Morrison tried to shake her testimony, suggesting family pressure or misheard words, but Lena remained firm. "I know what I heard. Gregory Walker wanted his younger son to have the family home." When the judge called for closing arguments, Elliot's attorney painted me as a manipulative opportunist who'd exploited an elderly man's guilt. Margot's response was simple and devastating. She presented the timeline of Father's amendment, made 13 months before his death when he was in perfect health, alongside hospital records confirming his mental clarity in his final days. "This isn't about family dynamics," Margot concluded. "It's about respecting a man's final wishes, properly documented and legally binding." Judge Hoffman deliberated for 20 minutes before returning. "The will amendment is valid. The estate is awarded to Jordan Walker." Elliot stood abruptly, his face a mask of controlled rage. Without a word, he walked out of the courtroom, his attorneys scrambling to follow. I'd won, but the victory felt hollow. I hadn't just inherited a house, I'd lost my brother forever. 6 months later, the Walker estate hummed with a different kind of energy. The sterile, modern furniture Elliot had installed was gone, replaced with comfortable couches and sturdy tables that could withstand the enthusiasm of teenagers. The East Wing, once Father's private office space, had been transformed into art studios and writing workshops, its walls now covered with poetry, paintings, and the dreams of kids who'd never had a place to express them. I stood in the front hall, watching Marcus, a 17-year-old from Dorchester, explain his sculpture to Sarah, a quiet girl who'd found her voice through creative writing. The house that had once felt like a mausoleum now overflowed with laughter, heated debates about art and literature, and the sound of young people discovering who they might become. "Mr. Walker?" Keisha, one of our regular participants, appeared at my elbow. "Ms. Rodriguez wants to know if you can look at her college essay." "Tell her I'll be right there," I said, smiling at the easy way these kids had claimed ownership of the space. This was what Mom had envisioned, a home filled with people who needed a place to belong. In the kitchen, I'd hung a photo of my parents taken on their 20th anniversary. Mom was laughing at something off camera, her hand resting on Father's arm, and even he was smiling, one of the few genuine smiles I'd ever captured on film. Beside it, I'd framed a picture of Baxter, Mom's old golden retriever, who'd been the most consistent source of warmth in the house during my childhood. The letter to Elliot sat in my desk drawer, written but never sent. I'd tried a dozen times to find the right words, to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. In the end, I'd realized that some wounds need time to heal, if they ever do at all. Maybe someday he'd understand that I hadn't taken the house from him. I'd simply accepted what Father had chosen to give. Lena visited sometimes, usually on Sundays when the workshops were closed. She'd served Elliot with divorce papers 3 months after the trial, citing irreconcilable differences. "I realized I'd married someone I didn't really know," she'd told me. Or maybe someone who didn't know himself. As evening approached, and the last of the day's participants headed home, I walked out to the front porch where Mom used to sit with her morning coffee. Spring was coming early this year, and I could see the first buds forming on the oak trees that had watched over 3 generations of Walkers. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Thanks for believing in us, Mr. W. This place changed my life." I smiled, thinking of Mom's words in her hidden letter, "Build something beautiful." The house was still the same ivy-covered brick structure it had always been, but it had become something neither Father nor Elliot could have imagined. Not a monument to success or a symbol of status, but a home in the truest sense of the word. As the sun set over the estate, I could almost hear the echo of young voices in the evening air, filling the halls with the kind of warmth that no amount of money could buy. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.